Welcome, everybody. I'm glad you could make it here today. I'm just going to do a very short introduction about Prosperity, and then I'm going to hand you over to Emma Richmond. Okay, so my name is Gary Mullen. I'm the co-founder of Prosperity. We opened our doors 23 years ago in Dublin, and we started recruiting in the advertising and design sector, and shortly afterwards we moved into the digital sector. We've been fortunate enough to have built an international business, so we've got offices now in Dublin and Barcelona, and we recruit in the Irish, UK, and Spanish and French market. We not only provide recruitment services, but we also provide other events and whatnot, and a salary survey which we serve to each market, which is used by many journalists across Europe as the go-to for the digital industry. And now I'm going to introduce you to Emma. Emma is an expert on law and business immigration with over 20 years experience. And today she's going to talk about the work permit law in Ireland, and we will have a short kind of Q&A afterwards. So without further ado, I'm going to pass you over to Emma, who's going to explain how work permits work in Ireland. Okay, thanks, Emma.
Thanks, Gary. I'm going to share my screen here as well. So hopefully that is sharing there now. So thank you very much, Gary, for that introduction. And as you mentioned, I'm a partner in employment and business immigration in Whitney Moore. Whitney Moore is a law firm based in Dublin, in Ballsbridge. We're around since 1882, so thankfully I wasn't around then. But it's a corporate law firm, so approximately 70% of our business is made up from small to medium-sized enterprises. We cover all sectors, so we would have clients in technology, hospitality, manufacturing, so a broad range of sectors covered, and within that obviously cover all aspects of advice, from corporate work to property to intellectual property, and of course my own area, employment and immigration. Over the last 20 or so years, I've been working in employment, working alongside HR and management teams, advising them on a day-to-day basis on HR issues, and from disciplinary grievance to including, unfortunately, redundancies will come up as well. The whole area of business immigration is something that has evolved over time. It is probably something that at the start of my career wouldn't have been at the top of my radar, but I think it's also demonstrates how the Irish market has changed. And for most HR or recruitment teams, unfortunately, work permits is a necessity, but it's because it's for a good reason as well. Obviously in Ireland, I think at the moment we're deemed at full employment, which is great on one side, but on the other side, it brings with it other challenges, and those challenges are in recruiting, and particularly in certain sectors. Overall, the Irish policy is what we would describe an open policy. So an open policy to migration. We want to encourage workers into Ireland. We need the workers in Ireland to sustain the economy. Currently, I think 17% of the people employed in Ireland are non-Irish. So it is a really substantial part of our employment network. Obviously, we have the advantage of being in the EU, which gives us access to a workforce of about 250 million. But even that is not always enough. And those are circumstances where we need to go outside of the EU market and recruit, particularly, as I said, in key areas. So I'm going to look at some of the work permits that people will consider in this situation. And I'm going to cover a range of them, but I will focus more on the critical skills work permit. So you'll see on the slide there's critical skills, general work permit, intra-company, and atypical permission. And one of the overriding rules for all work permits is, for any employer, is that they need to maintain a ratio of 50-50 EEA to non-EEA workers. So again, it's trying to get that balance. We want to encourage migration, but we also don't want to exclude our own EEA nationals from the workforce and just continually go outside. But it is important that we have access to it. So first of all, the critical skills occupation list is effectively the Bible for critical skills work permits. And this is the list that we will go to for all critical skills work permits. And if your role is lucky enough to land on this, well, then you're in line to get a critical skills work permit, which is, it is the golden ticket. It is the one people want, because it is designed to attract workers that are going to stay in Ireland, attract the right type of workers, and encourage them to stay. So it will give their spouse or partner a right to a work permit as well. They do not have to go through a separate process. From their arrival in Ireland, it is a path to citizenship. So their stay for citizenship, you need to be in the country resident for 5 out of the previous 9 years. So with the critical skills, that starts on day one. So it is a big selling point to migrant workers to come to Ireland who want to relocate permanently. You'll see that at the first bullet point, to get a critical skills work permit, you need to have the role fall on the critical skills occupation list and have a minimum salary of at least 32,000. But if your job does not fall on it, it's not the end of the world, particularly if you're recruiting higher paid workers. So you'll see if the role is paid over 64,000 and doesn't fall on the ineligible list, and I appreciate I'm referring to lists, and it's quite hard. You have two lists, the critical skills list and the ineligible list, and they are available to download from the Department of Enterprise, Trade and Employment. I always have 2 copies on my desk. I go to them regularly. They are updated every 6 months. The government runs a consultation process with employer representative bodies and with practitioners like ourselves. And effectively, people lobby to get certain categories onto the critical skills list, or if they fall onto the ineligible list. The critical skills list, it does shift a lot. And what I would say is, if you are considering going for a critical skills work permit, your role falls onto it, I would say don't hang around. I have had clients disappointed where we're all set to go with an application, and at the last minute, the list updates from the department and their role is no longer on it. So I would say just to move with speed on that. In terms of the critical skills occupation list and what's on it at the moment, I suppose in broad brush strokes in terms of sectors, you've got all IT professionals, you've a lot of engineering professionals, there's a large amount of health professionals listed on it, and those roles all eligible for critical skills lists. The IT professionals, it goes into a bit more detail. You'll see, kind of systems designers, you'll see animation and design artists. All of those are on the list. But there are those broad categories of IT professionals. And this is where, in Whitney Moore, we will work with our clients at an early stage in terms of drawing up their job spec. So most job specs will have a number of roles on it, a number of tasks on it. And why a company might focus on one or the other, maybe to attract the right candidate, or for another reason, even an internal reason in terms of selling it internally. So you may need to switch your focus. And I'm not saying, you're putting anything that isn't true on the form, but if there's an IT element to a role, then it's worth focusing on that when you're doing your job spec, when you're filling in your application form. So for example, in a marketing role, marketing roles of themselves are not eligible for a critical skills work permit. However, if it is digital marketing, if that marketing person is going to be managing the website, have input into the design on the website, the content on the website. That all changes the focus and pushes it towards that IT focused role. And that can allow, work permits to go through on that basis. Similarly, sales roles of themselves are not on the critical skills list. And in fact, they're actually on the ineligible list unless it's more of an international sales roles and there's a fluency in a non-EEA language. So I've succeeded in getting a number of those in recent times, where customer businesses are servicing an Indian market or selling to China and they need that language fluency piece. You will succeed in getting your critical skills work permit for those types of roles. But if in the event your role, you can't get it to fit into a critical skills list role, nor does it qualify for a salary of over 64,000, all is not lost. You still have options. And in that case, your options would come to your general work permit. So this is a much broader work permit. This covers any role so long as it's not on the ineligible list. So it's, as you see, the minimum salary is lower, and it can actually drop down to 27,000 for recent graduates as well. So it's even lower again. The disadvantage to this and where the issues arise is the processing time. The critical skills work permit that I just went through there, they have speeded up the processing time for that significantly since COVID. And they invested a lot in terms of personnel and recruitment and how they process them. So when I checked this morning, they're currently processing work permits that were submitted on the 2nd of May for critical skills, and for general work permits, they're processing ones submitted on the 27th of April. So all much faster than it used to be. But where the time lag comes in for general work permits is that prior to applying for it, you need to satisfy advertising requirements. So you will need to advertise your role in 3 different locations. You will need to put it on a jobs.ie website for a minimum of 28 days. You will also need to advertise it in a local and national newspaper. And in that, and I know most of you probably don't advertise in newspapers these days, but if you see ads in the paper now, it is typically where someone's intends to apply for a work permit. But that job, there's certain criteria even within the ad that needs to be listed. So, it's your details of the place of work. It needs the actual salary. It needs the number of hours per week. So it's quite detailed. And frequently where I've come into it is that I've a client who's gone and tried to do it themselves. They've fallen down and missed the salary on the ad in the newspaper. And so their application has failed. So then I'm doing it. So again, I would encourage you to take the advice early so that we can set you on the right path and make sure that you're not encountering those delays or those hiccups. The other element to the general work permit is that the roles can't be on the ineligible list. And again, I mentioned that sales role. So again, worth checking what your job spec is and making sure that if there's elements of the role that could fall into the ineligible list, that they're not the elements you're promoting, that, you can include them, but they don't appear to the person processing application that they are the core element to the role. For both the critical skills and the general work permit, I would say the cost of applying is, it is relatively good value. It's €1,000 is the application fee to the department, and that is 90% refundable if your application fails. So it is not designed to be prohibitive. It's not designed to discourage applications. It is designed to encourage applications. I mentioned obviously the processing times and how they have speeded up significantly. One thing I would flag for you if you are applying for work permits is to factor in what country the person is coming from. So for example, if they're coming from the US, that is a non-visa required company. So they don't need to, once they have their work permit, they can come to Ireland and they can sort out their immigration permissions on arrival in Ireland. If, however, they're coming from India, they will need to apply for a visa prior to traveling. So our work permits and our immigration permissions run in parallel. So once they have a work permit, they can then apply for their visa. But even within India, they need to apply, depending on where they live, to different consulates, and waiting lists can vary according to which one it's going through. So I'd say just to try to get an estimate from the local, prior to them putting in their application, so that you can at least provide for that time. Overall, though, Ireland, our delays, what we think are bad delays, are nothing compared to some of the delays in other embassies around the world. I think an Indian national looking to go to the US, as far as I understand, they don't have a prospect of getting a visa till 2024 at the moment. So, we're nothing like that. We're a couple of weeks. It's, a bit frustrating and you want to get going, but it's not the end of the world. And it's not going to stop you going ahead with the right candidate. If neither the critical skills or the general work permit are for you, other options that I would encourage you to consider would be the intra-company transfer permit, which is effective. It is exactly what it says it is. It's designed for within a group of companies to transfer key personnel. It is not designed to be a permanent solution. It is not designed for a long-term, residence. So you get an initial 2-year permission, and that can be extended up to 5 years. Whereas, as I mentioned, with the critical skills work permit, the intention is to encourage people to remain. So whilst they would get an initial permission for 2 years, when they go to renew, they actually transfer to what's called a stamp 4. So it's onto a permanent immigration stamp. And so they don't need to go through that process of justifying their role or their salary and making sure that it fits within the criteria. They move on to that stamp 4. So what you'll sometimes see, and I suppose from most people here are employers, and what they want to make sure is that people aren't going to come here and jump ship as soon as they arrive. The initial job offer for a work permit is typically 2 years. Certainly for the critical skills, once they move on to the stamp 4, they will have freedom to move. So, at the moment, there is talk of the Irish system. They're looking to make them more transferable, which is in the interests of the worker, that, they can come here on one work permit, but move it to another employer and get a better job or a different job as they arrive. Employers don't want to hear that, because if you've invested in recruiting outside of the EEA and putting in a work permit application, you run that risk. But on the flip side, maybe you'll pick up a candidate from another employer. But again, that isn't in yet. That's talk of how do we make our system even more attractive than it already is. And the other type of permission that I just want to mention, it's actually an immigration permission. It's not a work permit. It's this atypical permission. So again, if you're looking to relocate a worker from another group company or from a client over to Ireland for under 90 days, you're going to apply for this atypical permission. Because if an individual from outside of the EEA is traveling to Ireland, they're not entitled to work in Ireland, even if it's only for a week. They can attend conferences, they can attend meetings, but they can't actually carry out work. So you may need to consider this. There's nothing shorter than 90 days. I've had businesses frustrated that someone does just want to come for a week to work, and technically, if they're coming to Ireland, they're not entitled to carry out work unless they have some form of work permission. I think generally, as I said, our work permit system is designed to attract people into Ireland. And for those of you who are in that, having that challenge of recruitment, I would encourage you to talk to myself, talk to your other advisors as to what can you do at an early stage to make sure your job description falls within whatever category it can, whether it's on the critical skills list, or are you going to pay the bigger salary, or, you know, if accept it's not and go for your general work permit, just making sure it's not on the ineligible list. And to be honest, the ineligible list doesn't actually cause that many issues, because the roles that are on the ineligible list tend to be roles that are, you know, there's plenty of workforce for those roles. So you're not in those challenging situations. And what often happens with the critical skills permit is it's often people who are here on a student permission and are working part-time, and people want to transition them over to another work permit. And you know, that can be a good way of getting people in the door. So again, I would encourage you to maybe look at that early stage recruitment, which can help in terms of the work permits. So I think, you know, most of you here, and I can see there's already chats coming into the chat and the Q&A. So I'll hand it back to Gary, and he can maybe put some questions to me, and hopefully we can give you a clear picture of next steps.
That's great. Thanks very much, Emma. Really appreciate that. Okay, so the couple of questions coming in, I'll just start with, we'll just work our way through them. This one's from Deborah, and she's asking, so if the role is not ineligible on the ineligible list and the salary is 64,000 or more, it is possible to apply for critical skills, isn't that correct?
Yeah, that's it. You can apply for your critical skills once it's over the 64 and not on the ineligible list. What you will need to show is that the person has the requisite experience or qualifications for the role. So typically, you know, it is a degree qualification, or if, you know, they've 20 years experience in that role, then they'll get their critical skills work permit.
Brilliant, thanks. Another one came in from Yvonne. She was asking, in general, would the role of product owner be on the eligible list for critical skills, which I might be able to help with the answer.
Thank you.
Yeah, because Yvonne, I would say definitely yes, as long as there is a, you know, I know with product owners, there is generally a technical requirement. So I would actually highlight the technical, really highlight the technical requirements on that actual application as a product owner. And if you can highlight, and I would say stack the definite technical side to that role, I think there's every chance that you would be able to get a work permit.
Yeah, I think what you need to remember, no different to myself, you know, when you put up the word product owner, I have no real concept of what's involved in a day-to-day role for a product owner, and the person processing the work permit doesn't either. So it's your job to spell it out for them. And so that's where, you know, it's worth going into the detail, spending the time on your application form to make sure you put that detail in.
Yeah, I agree. And like for other areas of our business, like people would know us for digital marketing or design or, you know, UX, and it's the same across these roles as well. They all have a technical element, whether it be HTML or, you know, the Google products or analytics or whatnot. And I think, you know, I think we're all in agreement that if you can highlight the technical side, even to a design role or a UX role, or you can highlight, you know, around digital marketing, what that technical requirement is, it's more likely they're going to consider a work permit.
Yeah, and certainly one of the things I will do with a lot of the technical roles that I'm applying, you know, all those, you know, systems, packages, you know, your HTML, I list all that in the job description. I'll go into that detail. So it's not the job description you're putting out to the candidate to try to get them to apply. This is the job description for getting your work permit, that you need to just put as much of the technical info in as possible.
Okay, brilliant. A question in there from Rebecca. After 2 years of critical skills and employee transfer to stamp 4, is their 1G spouse also entitled to a stamp 4 on the same timeline?
As far as I understand, they will transfer across at the same time. The application form itself, I'd need to look at it again, but as far as I'm aware, they are.
Great, thank you. I have one coming in from an anonymous attendee, and they're saying, we had a critical skills application for a digital activations exec recently, which was approved. Another employee in the same exact role applied using same job descriptions, etc. recently, and was refused on the basis that role was not considered eligible. Any ideas on how to appeal this?
I would appeal and add the detail, add the technical detail, put even more in if you can. Unfortunately, no different to any system, you know, it's humans processing these, and what one human reads and the other human, you know, it just, whose desk did it land on the day? So definitely there's merit in appealing. I would always appeal any refusals I get, I appeal them. There's no extra cost. You will get your you know, you'll get your refund even if it still gets refused at appeal stage. So always merit in putting in the appeal and just seeing, does the separate set of eyes get it through?
Emma, would it be worth using the reference point on the first one that was approved and using that as an example of an application that was approved?
Yeah, absolutely. I would confirm that, you know, you have another applicant who was successful on the basis of that it did whatever, you know, the category that it's falling within on the critical skills list, and putting it in on that basis as well.
Brilliant. A question here from Charlie. If I hire someone on the critical skills visa, but after the first month I see it's not the right person, does the candidate lose the permit?
They do, unfortunately. And that is, if they're made redundant, they have 6 months to hold that they can get another role. But if you dismiss them or terminate the employment, unfortunately, they do lose their critical skills work permit. So if they're looking for another job in Ireland, they'll need that new employer to get them another work permit.
Right. Here's one from Kira. When considering work permits applications, does a level of seniority or junior position of a candidate affect the likelihood of approval? Is it easier to obtain a work permit for candidates in higher level positions compared to those in junior roles?
Not the seniority doesn't affect the applications that I've seen. It's either, you know, if it's critical skills, it's either on the list or it isn't on the list, or it has the salary. And if it's going to have the salary of 64,000, it's probably a more junior role. What I've seen a few questions arise recently is where it very obviously is quite a senior position, but somebody's hiring someone from outside of Ireland and they're putting a salary of like 35,000 on it, knowing that the person just wants to come to Ireland. And I've had a few of those questioned where it's almost suspicious that the salary doesn't quite match the job description that you're putting forward. So I would just be conscious on that front as well.
That's great, Evan. Thanks. There's one question here. If a person is denied from Gemma, if a person is denied the permit, can they try a second time with a different specifications and get the permit? Or is it just one try per candidate?
Yeah, you can apply as many times as you like. And I have done it myself. I've had plenty of cases where clients have come to me, they've had it refused and we've gone again. And it could sometimes, even for the general work permit, you know, it may involve going right back to scratch and re-advertising the role and putting it through again.
Okay, and here is the last, the last question. Oh, sorry, another one just came in. In that case, when critical skills employment holder is dismissed or terminated, how long can they remain in Ireland to find a new job? I know it's 6 months for redundancy, but if terminated, the guidance isn't clear.
Yeah, so typically what happens in that instance is for redundancy, it's 6 months and they can, you know, their work permit can transfer on that. Typically it's whatever on the immigration permission, but it's usually a 6 months period as well. And, you know, I know plenty of candidates generally, you know, where they've come in on a critical skills, they're in a market that is in demand. So most of the people that I've come across that have been in that unfortunate situation, they've got that other job within that time period.
Great. Okay. Now we have time for, we have another question here. And then if anyone has any last minute questions or anything they need assistance with, just let us know. One from Lola here. What are the most common reasons for a refusal of a work permit sponsorship?
Typically, if it depends, I suppose it depends on the work permit, first of all. But certainly, so I'll deal with the easy ones, the general work permits. Typically, I've had those refused is because the labour market's needs test hasn't been met. The advertising requirements haven't been met. That is the most common reason for that being met, failing the application. For the critical skills, it can be that argument over whether or not it falls onto the list. You know, is the role sufficiently falling into that category? And again, as I said, you can download the list and have a look at it. So that would be the usual, that it doesn't fall within that. I flagged earlier that level of suspicion where, you know, the role doesn't quite match the salary. But generally that just drives queries. And that is one of the improvements that has come into the system in recent times, is that in the past, your application either got through or it failed. Now they will engage with you. So obviously I will act as an agent for a number of employers. And when I put in the application, if they have a query, be it there's a lack of documentation or they're not clear on someone's role, you know, I had it recently where it was someone was a director in a foreign entity and they're moving to Ireland. They're going to be an employee in the Irish entity. And they were like, how are they a director and applying for a work permit? The person handling it just didn't understand the differences and that they were a director but not an employee in the other entity. So, you know, they will ask the questions and they give you, you know, they give you 28 days to reply to those questions. The other biggest issue I have is the most common query I have is the printout from the revenue that you need to submit with your application. And this is demonstrating the monthly return being made to revenue. So it shows what other employees are on your books. And that's for the purposes of satisfying the 50-50 ratio. And more often than not, accountants, be it internal or external, are giving me the wrong document. So it's getting that document right. It used to be much easier when we had our, you know, our P45s, our P60 system. It was easier to identify the document. Now you go to the accountant saying you want the printout and everyone gives you something different. So it's just to get that right at the start.
Brilliant. Emma, final question, last question, very quickly. How many people can a company apply for work permits? Is there a limitation? Like one company, can they do as many as they like?
Yeah, once they maintain that 50-50 ratio of EEA to non-EEA worker, you can apply for as many as you like. What I would say is if you do think you're going to be applying for a number, a large number, you can go under the trusted partner route. So trusted partner is where it's effectively, I don't think it's right to say it's a fast track route. It used to be a fast track. It's not as fast as it used to be, and there's not a huge difference. But what the advantage to that is, if you're going to be making 10 applications in a year, effectively the application form becomes much shorter. So all the company details are on file, they're all approved. So you don't have to keep filling that in every time you go to process an application. It's certainly, you know, it still has the same cost to it from an application fee. They used to promise a 7-day turnaround. Unfortunately, they can't quite hold themselves to the 7-day turnaround, but who knows, they might get back to it. But certainly if you're doing more than 2 or 3 permits in a year, I'd encourage you to register as a trusted partner. There's an application form for that. And actually, they don't define what you have, how many permits you have to be a trusted partner, or how many you think you'll need to be a trusted partner. So, you know, if you think you're going to have a few during the year, and even if you don't, I just go put it in and at least save yourselves a little bit of paperwork.
Great. Listen, Emma, thank you so much. We have people asking us, I've got a couple of emails in and a couple of messages asking, will they be able to obtain a copy of this for their, you know, and yes, we will be able to send you more information on this webinar. And if you do have any additional questions, like when you go back to your teams or what, you can always email me and we'll do our very best to get the right answers, you know, for you. On that note, I'd just like to thank Emma very, very much, Emma Richmond, from Whitney Moore for doing such a great job. Thank you. And I'd also like to thank the team here, Xavi and Natalia, for organizing the event. And it looks so easy to do, but I know there's a lot of organization and whatnot that goes into it. So thanks very much, guys, for putting the time and effort into this. And on that note, any feedback you may have, I would really strongly, appreciate if you have any feedback for us as we continue to do these webinars, and what you'd like to see potentially in the future, how we can help you, in your day-to-day jobs. So thank you very much, everyone, and have a great day. And I hope to see you all soon. Okay, take care. Thanks, Emma.
Thanks. Bye. Bye.